Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. And so thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. What is our Tuesday get together at 5 o'clock for the Policy Leadership Academy, Best Start Region 5 with Best Start under Children's Bureau umbrella. And welcome. This is actually the module 10. And so you've made it. It's the end. This is the last module with a speaker. So super excited that you've joined us once more for the Policy Academy, and we have such a special speaker today. Also, just to remind you, it is Happy International Women's Day, and I didn't plan this, but how utterly exciting to have International Women's Day with what is a living legend in California with the ag work. I mean, it's just so exciting to have our speaker with us today. And so, as you may know, today we have Miss Dolores Huerta, who is going to be speaking on civic engagement. Super, super excited. And I'm going to turn it over to my director, Sylvia Scott, to introduce Miss Huerta.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. It's an honor for me to welcome the legendary Dolores Huerta, founder and president of the Dolores Huerta Foundation. Dolores Huerta is a civil rights activist and community organizer. She has worked for labor rights and social justice for over 50 years. In 1962, she and Cesar Chavez founded the United Farm Workers Union. She served as vice president and played a critical role in many of the union's accomplishments for 4 decades. In 2002, she received the Puffin Nation $100,000 prize for creative citizenship, which she used to establish the Dolores Huerta Foundation. The Dolores Huerta Foundation is connecting groundbreaking community-based organizing to state and national movements to register and educate voters, to advocate for education reform, to bring about infrastructure improvements in low-income communities, to advocate for greater equality for the LGBT community, and to create strong leadership development. She has received numerous awards, among them the Eleanor Roosevelt Human Rights Award from President Clinton in 1998. In 2012, President Obama bestowed Dolores with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the United States. And it's especially fitting today that it is the International Women's Day. Please help me welcome the inspiring Señora Dolores Huerta.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. And thank you for choosing this important topic, civic engagement. When we see what's happening in the world today, what's happening with the Russia invasion of Ukraine, when we see the many states that are trying to suppress the voting of people of color, when we see the failure of some of the many important benefits that President Biden was trying to pass, like universal daycare for all of us, free community college for for all of the states in the United States of America. And we see the Equal Rights Amendment here as we celebrate International Women's Day. Who knew? A lot of people assume that women have equal rights as men in the United States of America. Well, guess what? We don't. Not only that, but the sad part is that it would be the 19th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States if women had equal rights as men. But the United States is one of the few countries in the world that has not ratified the Equal Rights Amendment for women. And when we think, how do we solve this? How do we solve these challenges that we have right now? And it really comes back down to civic engagement. And we say those words that they seem a little broad, and they do encompass a lot, but what it really comes down to is people power, people having the right to vote, people having the right to choose their own representatives, like we want to do here in the United States. But then when we think of what's happening in the Ukraine, when people are having their country taken away from them, and of course that is not true representation. So this is why civic engagement is so crucial and so important. Now, here in the United States, I think we take our democracy for granted, but we have seen with the attacks that happened on our capital, that we cannot take democracy for granted. And with the other issues that I mentioned before, where they're trying to take away people's right to vote, people take away women's rights for the reproductive freedom that are also in the balance right now. The right of LGBTQ people to select a partner and marry whomever they want, and that is also being threatened. You know what? I guess when we talk about civic engagement, we have to put an equal sign there that says civic engagement equals democracy. Or we can turn that around. Without civic engagement, you could not have a democracy. And this is why this is so very, very important. Unfortunately, we know that in our school system today, young people are not taught civic engagement like they were when I went to school. When I was a youngster in elementary school, we were taught about civic engagement. We were taught about the Bill of Rights and why it's important for people to vote. And when we think, well, why is this happening? Well, it's very deliberate. It's very, very deliberate. There was a great Spanish philosopher named Jose Ortega y Gasset. He was in Spain before the dictatorship of Franco, before Franco took over Spain. And he wrote a book, and the book is called Revolution of the Masses, okay? It's a very simple book. It's only about 100 pages. But his thesis of his book is that if you do not have an educated citizenry, then what you have, the greedy and the powerful will rule if you do not have an educated citizenry. And so when we think that all of these things that I've mentioned that are not included in our school books today, then we kind of get into a situation that we have in the United States of America right now, where you have 10% of the powerful corporations and the powerful families in the United States that own 90% of the wealth. 10% of the families, wealthy families and corporations own 90% of the wealth. And so we see all around us where we have the homeless situation that we have right now, where people are on the street, they're unhoused, that they don't have housing. And we see that the price of housing and the price of rents is still going up, which means that there will be more people on the street. We see that we do not have, in the United States, we do not have universal health care like they have in places like Scandinavia, Latin America, even teeny Cuba, which is a country that has an economic boycott by the United States. What do they have? They have universal health care, and they also have free college education for all of the people in Cuba. And so when we think about this, that you have free college education and free healthcare for the people in Cuba, this is a country small and it's poor, and it has an economic boycott by the United States of America. So we are the richest country in the world. Why do we not have those benefits for the people in the United States of America? So, well, we should say we could have them, but we don't have them. But that does mean that we also have to think about fighting to get those benefits for the people in our country. I was so fortunate in my life that I met a great gentleman named Fred Ross Sr. He had been a teacher at USC, University of Southern California. And then he was hired to run a farm worker labor camp in a little town called Arvin, California, that's about 15 miles south of Bakersfield. And Mr. Ross, he taught myself and Cesar Chavez and many other organizers how to organize people at the grassroots level. And while that seems like, a lot of times people see the film about Cesar Chavez and they say, well, Cesar walked into a field and all the workers went on strike, okay? People don't realize that when Cesar and I started the Farm Workers Union, we organized people in their homes for 3 years. We started organizing in 1962. The strike started in 1965. And we were actually going to organize until 1968. But what happened is that the Filipino brothers, they went out on strike and then we had to support them. So that kind of derailed our plans. But then again, we probably never would have won with the strike. And the only way that we could win is that we had to send farm workers all over the United States of America and teach them how to do these basic organizing. And I'm going to explain the organizing method to you. It's really quite simple. But by doing this, we were able to actually get 17 million people in the United States to stop eating grapes. And that's how we won, because of the people would pick at the markets that were selling grapes, and just people in mass just stopped eating grapes. And that's how we won. Well, I'm going to tell you the secret method of organizing that Fred Ross Sr. taught myself and Cesar. And I'm sure that some of the older folk here in the Zoom will remember the Tupperware parties. Do you remember those Tupperware parties? So you have a meeting and to sell Tupperware, and you bring a few friends together, and then what they do after they have their presentation, then they ask somebody in the room if they would be willing to have another Tupperware party at their house. Okay, and that's exactly what we do with our organizing. Is we have a meeting in someone's home, and then we ask them if they could host another meeting. And so each one of our organizers then has to meet with 200 people in their homes, 200 people. Then we bring them all together, and then we ask them, do they want to form an organization? And we call our organizations vecinos, or neighbors, because neighbors are supposed to help each other, right? And then after we get them all together, then we break them out into small groups, and then we ask them to, we put a lot of we used to call it butcher paper in the past, but we put these notepads, and then what they have to do is they have to list the things that they want to improve in their community. And then after they list the things that they have to vote for one or two issues. It could be a street light. It could be a street that needs to have pavement on it. It could be a neighborhood park. One of our teams, they had a water company from Texas that was handling their water and charging them exorbitant fees. So they wanted to get rid of that water company and take over the management of the water in their own town. So that was their priority. So after they decide on their priority, then we make an action plan. Okay, what do we do to make sure that you want this project to be completed? And so then we make the action plan, and then we say, okay, who's going to volunteer to make this happen? And so here you have folks that have never done any kind of civic work before, and they're volunteering to do the work. And that's where the magic happens, because the ordinary people, then they find out that they can pass a petition. Like one of our groups did, they passed a petition because they did not have a gymnasium at their school. And they passed a petition, they passed a bond issue, they got a brand new state of the art gymnasium for their middle school. Another group, as I mentioned, got a neighborhood park that they wanted, and so on and so on. And then once they see that they have accomplished this, then they know that they have the power to make the changes in their community. And then, they've gone to the school board meetings, they've gone to city council meetings and boards of supervisors, and then they're thinking, hey, I can do what they do. Why don't I run for that office and get myself elected? And they do. Don't speak English, so then they say, okay, we have to have translations at every meeting, and they get the translations. So the whole idea is building power from the ground up. Building power from the ground up. Recently, we did a big program on redistricting. Our redistricting, the maps that we drew were so good that the Independent Commission on Redistricting accepted our maps in total in the Central Valley. So unfortunately, they did not cover school boards. They did not cover boards of supervisors. They only covered the Assembly and Senate districts, okay? So, and congressional district. So now, we are still fighting to try to get the city councils and the board of supervisors and the school boards to also change the way that people are elected, to make sure that we have representation from all of the people in the community. So we're still fighting that. And what we will do in some of these other areas where we do not get our maps accepted, then what we're going to do, we're going to sue them and say that you're in violation of the Voting Rights Act, the Federal Voting Rights Act, or the State Voting Rights Act, the California Voting Rights Act. So one way or another, and we have filed suits, and we have won suits when we did not get fair maps for people's representation. And we're even going to go down to the level of the water district. and the utility districts, because this in a democracy, then people should have a voice and they should have a position on all of these boards. And by the way, since we're celebrating International Women's Day, I do want to give you a quote by Coretta Scott King. And Coretta Scott King said this: "We will never have peace in the world until women take power." Okay. Now I have kind of amended that to say we will never have peace in the world until feminists take power, because we know that there are a lot of men out there, and I'm sure men that are here in our Zoom meeting today, that also they would respect women and they would promote and support women taking power. Okay, so we want to give all of those men, well, give them a big applause for supporting women's rights. So as I said before, I was very fortunate to meet this man, Fred Ross Sr., who taught myself and Cesar the art of grassroots organizing. And I guess once you start organizing at the grassroots level, it's very addictive, because when you see people taking power the way that they do and the way that we organize, then you don't want to stop that, because there are more communities out there that if they only knew that they had that power, that they would jump in and take that power, that they can change their communities. So the work needs to expand. With our foundation right now, we are active in about 17 different school districts, where we organize the parents and the students, and then they go to the school boards and they make the recommendations. Over 40% of the recommendations that they have made have gotten accepted. I want to give you a couple of examples. When the pandemic broke out, our elementary school system there in Bakersfield, they were not sure whether they wanted to continue the meals, the lunch meals for the students. Well, we said, no, you have to continue the lunch meal, because a lot of students, people live in poverty and they depend on these meals for the kids. And so they did continue them. Another school district, they had $350,000 that they were going to use to put more police on campuses. So we said, no, let's take that $350,000 and let's put it into more support for the teachers, more nurses, more counselors, more social workers. And so we were successful in getting that $350,000 shifted from police on the school campuses and shifted that to more support for the teachers. So we're doing a lot to stop the school to prison pipeline. We actually had to sue the current high school district in the Bakersfield, California, because they had thrown out of school 2,500 students in 1 year. And the vast majority of those students were Black and brown. Well, because of our lawsuit now, that expulsions of 2,500 students, the last count was 21, from 2,500 to 21. And now they have to change all of their behaviors in that school to get positive behavior intervention systems, to have a Hispanic Heritage Month, to have a Black History Month, and to make the school more welcoming for students of color. And the fight's not over yet there. And when we think of when we think of the Central Valley of California, okay, this is a very rich agribusiness, billions of dollars that are you might say, the whole income that they get from agriculture. The people that we're organizing, for the most part, not all, but for the most part, are the families of those farm workers and the children of those farm workers. And think about this. In the Central Valley of California, starting from Bakersfield to Sacramento, there have been 22 prisons that have been built, and only one university, the University of Merced. And now these prisons are built with our tax dollars, okay? The university is built with our tax dollars. And the majority of those people in those prisons are Black and brown. The majority of those prisons, and poor white folk also that are in those prisons. So we know that this is wrong. So part of our fight has got to be, number one, to make sure that our young people don't get into crime, that, that they have the kind of support that they need, that they have the kind of education that they need. So, again, we can see that we're not focused on education. And of course, education is the most basic thing that we need. It's the foundation of our democracy. During World War II, during the war, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, we will not take one dime out of education because that is the soul of our country. They wanted to take money out of the education to pay for the war. And he said, no, we will not take one dime out of education or our libraries because that is the soul of the nation. So, this is what we have to do to continue to make our education strong, to make sure we get the right things in that curriculum so we can get rid of the misogyny and the sexism, the homophobia, the racism, the apathy that exists so that people will get engaged in civic action. Helen Keller said that one of the evils that we have in humankind is that has never been, scientists have not found a cure for it, is apathy. Apathy, that people don't understand that they need to get involved. And so that is our mission. And that needs to be all of our mission, to be sure that we get people out there and we say to people, you've got to get engaged. We could not have a democracy if people are not engaged. I say it's like a football team. You have two teams that show up. The team that shows up is going to win, and the one that doesn't is going to lose. And that's pretty much the way it works. So democracy is something that we all have to fight for very hard if we're going to keep it. And if not, we're going to lose it. We're seeing now in our country that we are losing democracy because we are not doing the basics. And I remember hearing once that if you look at the United States of America and we get graded on how democratic of a country we are, when I mean democratic, I'm not talking about the party, I'm talking about our democracy. What are our numbers? We know that since we had the election of President Trump, that our percentages have gone down. And they continue to go down, especially when we have seen how the Supreme Court is so biased. And as I mentioned before, when you have all these states that are passing laws to prevent people of color from voting and to suppressing the vote. So that is what is damaging our democracy. So if anything, especially in all of our schools, we should really concentrate on and having our children understand how important it is for them to be engaged. Once I was at the Santa Ana Community College in California, and they had what they call a kinder caminata. In Spanish, caminata means like a march, okay, a walk. They had all of these kindergarten children. They're from several different schools, and they had little caps on, and the cap had the number of the year that they were going to graduate. And so it was so wonderful to see all these little teeny kids there marching with their caps on the college campus, okay? On the college campus. At the end of the march, they had different people standing in different stations. There was a fireman, there was a doctor, there was a policeman, there was a teacher, and so the children was seen, and they got to go by all of these different representatives of different kinds of vocations. At the end of the march, they all had to vote. They were all given ballots, and they had to vote for their favorite cartoon character. Was it Mickey Mouse or Minnie Mouse? Was it Goofy or Donald Duck? So all of the children had to vote, and they were all participating in voting while they were in kindergarten and looking at different vocations that they might want to do when they grow up. And I thought that was the greatest demonstration of democracy, because when children start at a very young age, then they know that this is part of the fabric of their family, part of the fabric of their life. Myself, I was 21 years old, but back then when I was 21, you couldn't be 18, you had to be 21. But on my birthday, my mother took me down and we got registered to vote. She registered me to vote. And my father was an assemblyman in the state of New Mexico. I had a first cousin that was a judge in New Mexico. And I remember hearing the talking when I was a little girl, where different family members would be talking about this candidate or that candidate, or this one's good, that was no good. So, just registering to vote was one thing. But then when I got involved with Mr. Fred Ross and he organized us, the first thing that we did after our first organizing meeting, everybody had to sign up to go register voters. And it's kind of interesting. And I have to confess that I, like many other people, was a little flaky, okay, at the beginning. So I signed up to go register voters on maybe Tuesday and Thursday. And But then I was going to college at the time. And then Mr. Ross would call me every day and he would say, okay, just to remind you that we're going to go register voters. It's Tuesday. And then we're going to go out again on Thursday. Okay, so we go out there. And in those days, you couldn't just, you had to become deputized. Or, they had all of these complications for people to register to vote. And then all of a sudden, I got a call from Mr. Ross, and it wasn't Tuesday, it was Monday. And then he called me on Wednesday. And then all of a sudden, he was asking me to register voters Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, okay? 5 days a week. And I, like a lot of flaky people, was thought, okay, well, I'll figure out how I can avoid him. So, but then the minute I got home, the minute I walked in the door, there was the phone ringing, and it was Mr. Ross. And he would say, well, I really haven't gotten a lot of people to come out, and I don't want to be out there by myself. And of course, I was not going to let him be out there by himself. So of course, pretty soon I was doing registration 5 days a week. So I tried to get right out from under it. And this is what we have to do as organizers. And I'm going to quote Mr. Ross on this. He'd say, you have to pull people and you have to push people. You have to pull them and you have to push them. But the main thing is, like, he would not let me get away with my flakiness, then we can't let other people get away with their flakiness. Because, and the one mentality that you have to have as an organizer is you have to get it in your head that you're not bothering people. You're not bothering them. You are doing them a favor. You are doing them a favor because you're making them strong. You're getting them to be committed, and you're getting them to understand how important they are and the fact that they have the power to change things. And so that is the work of organizers. This is what we have to do. We have to just keep after people. And oftentimes people say, well, you don't need a lot of people to do the work. And I say, look, Jesus Christ, who could do miracles, he needed the 12 disciples to help him, okay? He couldn't do it all by himself. And so that's why it's important that all of us, stick together. The other thing I like to say is that we as a human species on this planet, we would have never survived had we not supported each other, protected each other, taken care of each other, because, we would have been lunch for the big animals, okay? Yeah, we kind of outsmarted the big animals with our intelligence, but also by working together in teams. Now, there's one other thing too, I just want to say in terms of combating the racism that exists in our society, is that we have to remember that we are one human race. And we should never use the word race unless it's attached to the word human. Together, human race. Because we have a lot of different ethnic groups. We have a lot of different nationalities, but we only have one human race, Homo sapiens. And I like to remind everybody that our human race began in Africa. Human civilization began in Africa. And as people went across the planet, they lost their color. Now they have to go to the tanning salon or to the beach to get the color back, okay? So we can say to all of those white supremacists out there and those neo-Nazis out there, you know what? Just get over it. You're Africans, okay? Just get over it, you're Africans. And if we can remember that we're like, one species, one human race, that we are all related. I did an event earlier today, and it was an open event. Everybody was vaccinated, and they had to show proof of their vaccination, et cetera. And also they were tested before they went into the event. So no, people were not masked. I think it's the first event I've been to since the pandemic that everybody was vaccinated and people were not masked. But then I asked them to do something, talking about our human species and how we're all related. I asked them all to turn to each other. And if we were doing this in person, I would say to you, turn to the person next to you, take their hand, and turn to that person and say, hello, relative. And then turn to the next person and say, hello, relative. Because that way we remind ourselves that we are all related. And that way we can end this hatred and this ignorance of somehow thinking that people, because they're lighter in skin, because we know that this came from slavery. And Dr. Martin Luther King said, racism is a sickness. It's an illness. And so part of what we have to do is to cure that sickness, cure that illness, okay? So that, people then are not discriminated or they have to suffer and don't get the support that they need from our society because they have a darker color of skin. Recently we have seen many allocades and, thinking about the people, the refugees that are fleeing the invasion of the Russians. And we think about them, and it's wonderful that they're getting the support for the world that they need. We would prefer that there was no invasion, no one was getting killed. And of course, in Russia, they don't have a democracy. That's why Putin is doing and getting away with what he's doing in Russia. But we have to think about, what about the refugees that were fleeing, when they were bombing Syria? What about those refugees? What about the refugees on the Mexican border? And Mexican-American border that are coming from these other countries. There were immigrants from Haiti that drowned, I think, about a month ago. That were, trying to get to the United States of America. And these are maybe economic refugees, not war. Although I think Haiti, after what they've gone through so much, and we think that Haiti is so close to the United States of America, how much more could we have done or can we do to help the people in Haiti? And I like to use the word bananas, okay? How many bananas do we consume every day in the United States? We can think of the jillions of bananas that are eaten here. And yet, when we look at the Mexican-American border, who are the people that are coming there? The people from Guatemala, from Honduras, from El Salvador, the people from Central America, where the bananas are grown, the people that produce the bananas. But do they get the money that we spend for the jillions of bananas that we eat? No, that money goes to Chiquita Banana. It goes to Dole Banana and the 50 banana companies from the United States of America. It does not go to the people in Guatemala, It does not go to the people that are producing and that are living in poverty and having to escape poverty and crime and global warming. So we have to think about those things. And the people that we elect to Washington, those representatives, we could say to them, we need to do more for the countries in the South and for other countries. When we think of the billions of dollars that have been spent on war in Afghanistan and Iraq, and if all of that money that we spend were turned to education and humanitarian aid, I think that we could get rid of wars eventually. But we know, again, it's going to take a lot of us people that believe in that to come to power to make that happen. So, we have the saying, si se puede, yes, we can, right? We have that saying, si se puede, yes, we can. And we have to really believe that and act on that to know that we can make it happen, because the majority of the people in the United States, the majority of the people in the world are people of good heart and goodwill. But again, how do we make it happen? We have to take the power, and we have to do it maybe one family at a time, getting people convinced, persuading them, informing them that they can commit to civic education, and together we can change the world. So I don't know if we have time for questions or challenges.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ms. Huerta. So this is a chance where if you have questions, you can take yourself off mute. You can put it in the chat, and we will read the chat if you would like. So this is your chance to ask your question.
Can we make a comment instead of a question, Tracy?
Absolutely, Kim.
Ms. Huerta, you are an amazing human being. And I thank you for this talk and this education, and really making myself, and I believe everybody on the Zoom call, really think and want to be a better person. So thank you so much. And your life is amazing, and all that you've done is just, wow. Thank you.
You're welcome. I've been lucky. I've been blessed.
Yes, ma'am.
And again, if you want to ask a question, just take yourself off mute or put it in the chat. Do we have any Anybody in the chat, Stephanie? That
I
has,
actually just want to, I don't have a question. I just had a comment.
sure, absolutely, want it.
Okay. I'm a fan. I'm a fan, Mrs. Dolores. I actually met you here at a Democratic event. We both spoke at the Machinist Hall. And I also want to thank you for speaking on behalf of students and law enforcement, because in the community with Cancel the Contract, we've been sharing that information. We just had our 1-year anniversary, and maybe you speaking about it this evening will get others to hear the harm it is and how those funds could be used in schools in other ways. So I appreciate you speaking on that and making awareness amidst all the other things that you've done in your lifetime. So thank you for speaking to our community. Thank you for all the things that you've done to fight for equality and justice for people of color. Again, thanks again. I appreciate you.
Well, thank you very much for those kind words.
Thank you, Juanette. Again, if you wanted to take yourself off mute, if you have a question, put it in the chat if you'd like. Do
Tracy,
we
I
have-
have a comment.
Go for it, Terry.
Dolores, I met you recently at the Foundation's Volunteer Appreciation Day at Big Shots. Our organization has partnered with your organization. I'm with Voices of Our Youth. And I just want to say thank you for what you said, because I've been trying to get through to my son, who was also there and honored. And I don't know what you said that made him change his whole outlook, but he now really understands what it means to help your community and, do something other than for yourself. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Well, I'm happy my words reached him. That's great to know. That's good to know.
That's
Hi,
excellent, Terry.
oh.
Oh, no, go
Hi,
ahead. Yep.
Dolores. I'm Sylvia Garner. I'm one of your vecinos here in the Antelope Valley.
Hi.
Power to the people. Si
Yes.
se puede.
Yeah.
So I've been with you for about 3 years. I work with Ruth all the time. And I just want to say, and I was looking at Terry, I'm like, I know I saw you. So thank you. Thank you for bringing that to my mind. But I just want to say the best leadership can come from the people that's actually doing the work. And all of the leadership workshops that you gave, before the pandemic, I was there and I learned so much. And that's what really made me truly an active member of my community. And so basically, when are you going to be doing those again?
Am I going to do what?
The workshops that you would do?
All right. Oh no, we're going to be starting our organizing training.
Yes.
A whole new cohort of organizers, and we'll be doing that at the end of March or at the beginning of April, because the one thing about the training that we do with this method that I describe is that once people learn, they have to go out and start, doing it immediately, because if they don't, then they forget. So you don't want to train the organizers and then send them out. And the main thing that we have to do is to get them to remove the fear that they have. So a lot of people, when you train them and you say, well, you got to go out there and you talk to strangers, people that don't know you, and you've got to ask them to give you a meeting in their home. And people just, they have a hard time doing that. Most people do. But to all of the folks I say, we're recruiting people to come and help us grow our social justice movement, right? And so you have to tell them, sure, you're going to get that anxiety, you're going to get that scared feeling, because you're talking to strangers and you're trying to get them to do something that they've never done, but you have to remember that those anxiety feelings are natural. They're natural, okay? It's like when you exercise and your muscles hurt. If your muscles hurt, you're doing the right thing. You're doing those exercises in the right way. The same thing with getting, you have to understand that you get that anxiety, but just ignore it. It's natural, because what you're doing is very, very important. And don't give in to those feelings because your body's not really telling you, don't do this. It's just preparing you and realizing that it's a natural feeling. But a lot of people, they give into that feeling and they think, no, I can't do that because I get too scared to do this. But you can overcome that. And the more you go out there, the more you speak to people, then the feeling goes away. And if it wasn't important, you wouldn't be feeling that anxiety to begin with. And I know one of the things that you wanted me to talk about is what happens when things don't go the way that you want them to go, when we have failures. Well, when that happens, that just means you have to take a different turn, a different direction, do something in a different way. But the main thing is we don't give up. Because, and I love to quote Caesar on this. Caesar would say, the only time that we lose is when we give up. That's the only time that we lose is when we give up. And so the main thing is that we have to keep it in our head. We're going to keep on organizing until we are able to accomplish what we want. And sometimes people they think it, we have kind of this smack world that we live in, that people want to see things happen really, really fast. Well, but you have to have patience sometimes, because the big things that we want, like the things I talked about earlier, about having universal health care. Well, recently in the State Assembly of California, we were just 3 votes short, just 3 votes short of getting that passed in the Assembly to have Medicare for everybody. Take out all the insurance companies, take out all of the middle people, and that way we can have better health care and cover everybody. This year in the State Assembly, I am almost 100% sure that we're going to be able to get again, covered California, the Medi-Cal for California, for all undocumented people in California. Isn't that amazing? We're going to be able to do that because, as you know, there's a huge surplus right now in the California state budget. We're going to be able to get some movement on climate change. Governor Newsom, in his budget message, he included billions of dollars to do away with the fossil fuels, and transition into green industries so that we can stop global warming. And we have a bill actually called Electrify California that we're going to be pushing in the state legislature. And that bill, when we pass it, I'm not going to say if, I'm going to say when, that it will cut the gas emissions in California by 30%. And as you all know, what happens in California goes back east, because we started here, because we're such a big state. So, there's a lot of promise of things that are happening right now. And for all of us that are living in this moment in time, this is what, young people say to me, gee, I wish I would have been around in the 60s. I thought, you know what? The 60s are back with steroids, okay? That is the world that we're living in right now. The 60s are back with steroids. And so it's a very exciting moment. And I want to quote Caesar on this one. You're going to love this quote. Caesar was recruiting a young man to join the movement. And he said, well, but Caesar, I can't, I'm in college right now. He said, well, when you go to college, you read about history, you talk about history, you write about history. But when you're in the movement, you can make history, okay? So this is, when you're talking about civic engagement, we are talking about making history. And so that's what I have to say, people, come and join us in the movement, because we're going to make some history, okay? We're going to make some history, we're going to make some changes.
Yeah, that's a great quote, Ms. Huerta. Again, if you have any questions, comments for Ms. Huerta, you can take yourself off mute. You can put it in the chat. Now's your chance. We've got a California living legend, although was born in New Mexico, correct? So if you have any questions, I think Sylvia's taking herself off mute. Sylvia Scott.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one, obviously, thank you. I think many of us are in awe of you, and it makes it difficult to even think of what questions I could ask. I would want to hear you keep talking, but you make such an impression on the young, the older women, the different generations. And I remember going out with my parents in Santa Barbara and going out to the protest and really taking a lot of the work out to the streets. And you would be in some of these organizations, these marches and stuff that we would do. And I just remember that I think my biggest lesson from you is not just about not giving up and si se puede, but it's more about to show how resilient we are. And I mean, if anybody can show resiliency, is you, right? Like, you know, you've been doing this for so long. And so thank you for modeling that. Thank you for being just a phenomenal woman in this world, and giving us the push to want to do it. I think we get so caught up in the everyday world that many of us maybe think at some point, like, I don't know if I can do that. I don't know. And here in the Antelope Valley, we've got a lot of things to get right, to bring to our community, to support our community with. So thank you for that support, and thank you for I think rejuvenating that hope that we can do stuff.
Yes, and but since this year is an election year, I am just really, really encouraging everybody to get involved in the elections, to do phone banking, to do door-to-door canvassing, to pass out information. We even do human billboarding. We stand in a street corner with a big sign to remind people to vote. And if you have a progressive candidate that you're supporting, you know, get out there and support that candidate, because many people, they get elected with maybe 50 votes or 100 votes, you know, that's how close it is right now. And we know that the conservatives and the people that want to keep the status quo, they don't want things to change. In fact, they want to go backwards. So, you know, they want to turn the clock back, that they are working very hard. They're very, very organized. It was interesting. Yesterday, I was in 2 different city council meetings, and one of them was in Delano, California, where the farm worker union began. And on that city council, there's a young woman. She's a leader. She's the president of a Service Employees International Union Local. Some of you might know her name is Veronica Vasquez. Well, the conservatives on that city council, there were 3 conservatives and 2 liberals. They're going after her. They're trying to get rid of her, because she is a labor Latina leader and a progressive leader. And then from that city council meeting, I went to another city council meeting in Visalia, California. And that was a spectacle. You had all of these unmasked, no mask people, and Planned Parenthood is trying to build a clinic in Visalia to give health for women. You know, so they can have mammograms and they can have family planning, and if they need to have an abortion, that they can be safe in doing that health procedure for themselves. Oh my gosh, you would have thought that. Anyway, they had all of these people. They were very hostile, very, very rude, you know, and they packed the city council meeting to go against giving women their reproductive rights. And so, you know, while we think we know we're making a lot of progress, at the same time, we know that there are those forces out there, and they use the issue of women's reproductive rights. They use the issue of gay rights, you know, to keep people divided. Because as long as they can keep people divided, you know, attacking transgender people, the most vulnerable people in our society, and to attack them and make them targets, you know, and they do this so that, again, if they keep the country divided on these so-called cultural issues, then they can keep their power, okay? So they want to keep everybody fighting each other so that they can keep their economic power. That's what it's all about. And now, we talked about education, okay? And now they're saying, okay, we don't want you to teach the issues of racism in schools, you know, or gay rights in schools. I mean, so all of this, the evil forces are out there. And the only way that we combat them, combat them, is through organizing at the grassroots level. That's why it's so important.
Absolutely. Anyone else have any comments? Want to girl fan like Sylvia did? So anybody wanted to say anything to Ms. Huerta, or we have any comments for her? Just take yourself off mute.
I could also probably comment also on the issues of labor rights.
Absolutely.
You know, when we think about workers, let's say farm workers as an example, the employers, they have the Farm Bureau Federation, they have the Grape and Tree Fruit League, they have the Western Growers Association, on and on and on. They have maybe Associated Farmers, they have maybe 10 organizations that they belong to, that they pay fees to those organizations, they pay dues to those organizations. Your doctors have the American Medical Association, The lawyers have the American Bar Association, and so on and so on and so on. Every group has every employer group has their Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, Chamber of Commerce. So they have their organizations. Why can't workers have their organization? Who needs an organization more, the working people or the employers? Obviously, the working people. And their organizations are called labor unions. That's what a labor union is. It's an organization of working people, like you have the Teachers Association, et cetera. So when you have people that go against workers having an organization, again, they have laws. In the South, they have these right to work laws, which it's not really a right to work. It's right to work without having better benefits or better wages. That's what it really translates to. And so when they have these laws to make it more difficult for unions to organize, you're depriving workers, again, of their representation on the job, and to protect you if you get fired unjustly, protection on the job, to have somebody represent you in Sacramento on legislation or in the US Congress, people that will fight for your rights as a worker. So that's why workers need an organization. And not only that, but we know that in the United States of America, our middle class is shrinking. Well, labor unions create the middle class because they are the ones that raise workers' wages. So if you don't have a middle class, again, you don't have a democracy. And that is kind of where we're going in the United States of America. But we have, as I mentioned before, you have the 10% of corporations, wealthy corporations and wealthy families like the Walden that own Walmart. You know, by the way, I tell my friends don't let their friends shop at Walmart, okay? Because unless they give the workers the right to have a union and also to respect their immigration rights, you know, people should not shop there because you're giving your money to the people that are oppressing workers. So we've got to support the rights of workers and we've got to support labor unions because again, it affects our democracy.
Absolutely. I was going to ask you, what about Target? No, just kidding. So also, it just listening to you, it's all cyclical, right? Because when you're talking about the middle class, and then you bring education into it, and how expensive it is to get an education now. So it's fascinating how it's just all, you know, it's all coming together to kind of create this what we've got now. Again, do you have a question or a comment for Ms. Huerta? Take yourself off mute. Put it in the chat. Now's your chance to talk to our living legend here who's gracious with her time. So I'm just waiting to see if we've got anybody else. Okay, I'm going to give it another couple seconds. Anyone wanting to take themselves off mute or chat?
Can I chime in?
Absolutely, Roxana.
Okay. So just truly an honor to be here with you. Thank you so much to Best Start for making this happen, and to you, Ms. Dolores Huerta. My name is Roxana Martinez, and you know, resident of the AV of over 25 years. And I'm at First 5LA now, but one thing that we are working on is really supporting the AV community, because the leaders, you know, I see so many faces here, and the work that is taking place in the Antelope Valley is truly remarkable. And I think our community is so collaborative in so many ways, and we're still growing to be more collaborative and to organize together. One question that I have is around moments that you've encountered where you run into challenges with leaders in an organization. Like, how do you know when to continue to push, when to relax a little bit and allow for that window to happen? And I say this because my position at First 5LA, one thing I always share is like my motto is like infiltrate and transform. So I feel like I'm going to get in the system if I can and transform it from within, but center community voice and community power. So I think that's something that I think some of us encounter. Like, how do you know how much to push when you're inside and when to allow for like the tension to, yeah, just your thoughts around this would be so helpful.
Well, I think it's always good to have an inside-outside strategy. Do something from within, but then organize from without. Especially for women, that's very important, because as you try to make changes within an organization, they might come after you for that. But if you're at the same time working with an organization that's outside of your workplace, And if they know that they've got your back, then they're going to, move a little bit more cautiously when they go after you. Like I was talking about Veronica Vasquez, this labor leader. Well, they had the hall full of her supporters. So at the end of that meeting, they kind of said, well, this is kind of an internal issue and we should talk about it internally, okay? Because they saw that she had that hall packed full of her supporters. So this is what you have to do. Always, kind of guard yourself, have a plan there, a support plan for yourself while you do this inside work. And I do, I've been on a lot of Zooms, and a lot of them have been with these people that I'm talking about, these big banks and big corporations. And some say, well, why do you want to talk to them? I said, because I want to talk to their workers. I want the workers to say to this organization, how many people of color do you have on your board? Do you have any gay or trans people on your board? How many women are on your board? So we can do a little bit of that, from within. And right now, the corporations are listening because they see what's happening in our country. And when you think about all of us, who put our money in banks, whatever, that we can put pressure on some of these financial institutions. Not that we've really found a formula yet. I think we're still trying to find a good one. But I always like to say to people, like they did when the Native Americans at Standing Rock were, fighting to stop that oil well, which they finally did. They were able to stop that oil well. Okay, it took a lot of people suffering. I think there's one young woman who's in jail now for 5 years because of the work she did at Standing Rock. But all of the work that they did, they finally were able to stop it. Well, part of that strategy was to get the people to take the money out of their banks. And I know Jane Fonda, I think she had some money in Wells Fargo. She had a demonstration at Wells Fargo and said, I'm pulling all my money out of your bank, and she did. And she got other people, instead of going to the bank and to the credit union. But right now we have this moment where we can really capitalize on this feeling, thanks to all of the people that marched with Black Lives Matter. They're the ones we have. Thanks to all of the women that marched in the Me Too movement. Everybody that's been out there marching and protesting and sending letters. You can, again, like the 60s, you can see it. It's in the air. We can feel it. We can feel it. And so now we just have to jump into the battle. This is what we have to do.
Yeah, super exciting time to be alive and living. Again, anyone have any questions, comments for our distinguished guest, Ms. Huerta? You can take yourself off mute. You can put it in the chat if you're shy. Any questions, comments?
I have one more question.
Sure, Sylvia.
So, Miss Dolores, I have probably over the last 7 to 10 years, I've had a lot of people try to talk me into going into politics, which I'm very passionate about things. But I feel like you, that my services are best utilized in the fight, in the movement. How have you measured what it is that you want to do? Like, you could have definitely gone into politics many times, I'm sure. What was your defining factor?
Well, I just love to empower people. I love to see people grow, see them getting engaged, and I kind of believe my mantra is that I believe in putting them in and taking them out. Putting them in, if they're good people, taking them out if they're not doing the work that they're supposed to be doing. But I would say if you have a taste for the politics and you want to do it, I would say go for it. But that in order to do that, you've got to do a lot of organizing. And this is something I didn't mention before, but one of the big things that we have that is preventing a lot of women, ordinary people like ourselves here on the Zoom, to go for office because we don't have the jillions of dollars that are needed. So we've got to push for campaign finance reform. Campaign finance reform, okay? So that people can actually run for office and that the taxpayer dollars should pay for that. They did have a similar law in Arizona. I think I got in trouble with one of the Supreme Court decisions, but this is something that we could start. And it's interesting that the politicians don't really mention that. And we've got to put it back on the table, back on the agenda, that we've got to start fighting for for a public reform so that ordinary citizens like yourself can run for office and you don't have to raise $1 million to do it. You know, that's the one thing I think we have to push to the politicians that come before us and say to them, okay, we want you to commit that you will support public campaign financing. All right. So, you know, it's not being talked about right now, but it's something that we definitely need to push. We have to get the money out of politics, you know, because when you have all these millionaires, they're like Joe Manchin, you know, the guy that was one of the 2 Democrats that did not vote for the universal health care or community college, the things that President Biden had in the Build Back Better Act. You know, he's a millionaire. So those millionaires, they don't represent us. They don't represent the ordinary people. And so we've got to get the ordinary people that are elected to office and less millionaires.
Thank you, Sylvia, for the question. Thank you, Ms. Huerta. Any further comments or questions that you have for our distinguished guest? I'm looking to see if anybody's taking themselves off mute. If you're shy, you can put it in the chat. Anyone have any comments or questions? Okay.
Well, while we're waiting, I want to recommend a couple of documentaries to you. And one of them is, it's called Foreigners in Their Own Lands. Foreigners in Their Own Lands. And this documentary is about when the Southwest, which used to belong to Mexico, was seized by the United States of America, and what happened to the people on those lands. You know, the kind of a genocide against Native Americans and against Mexicans that happened in the state of Texas and also in California, by the way. Yeah, the genocide that happened when those lands were taken. And I like to say, people Google a map of the United States before 1848. What you will see is that 1/3 of the United States was Mexico.
Oh yeah.
1/3. The United States took 50% of Mexico's land. And so when those people say to us, go back where you came from, we have to say, hey, we were here before the United States was the United States. And we talk about these foreigners at the border. These are the indigenous people of the continents, North America and South America. If anybody belongs on this land, it's them, right? The true immigrants to the United States came from Europe, like my great-grandmother on my mother's side, who came from Spain, you know, or my great-grandfather, again, on my mother's side, who came from England, you know. So these were the true immigrants to the United States of America. But I think that also clears up a lot. The other one, of course, is the movie about Emmett Till, and I'm sure that is shown in many, everybody needs to see that movie about a documentary about this 12-year-old young man who was murdered in, I believe, Mississippi, because he supposedly whistled at a white woman. And his mother had an open casket with his disfigured face, had an open casket. Over 50,000 people went by that casket. And that was, they say, was the beginning of the civil rights movement. And the other one that I love, and if you haven't seen it, you have to go see it, West Side Story, the new one that just came out, Rita Moreno, who was one of the original actors in the old West Side Story. But if you haven't seen it, go see it. I've seen it 3 times. That's how much I like that movie. Okay.
Yeah, you can never, good musical is always, is always good. And so again, any questions, comments for our distinguished guest this evening, Ms. Dolores Huerta? Looking to see if anybody's taking themselves off mute, or if you're too shy or you don't want to talk, you can put it in the chat. And I'm not seeing anyone. Okay, so if there's no comments, I'm going to wrap up. Okay, and so as always, this is the end of our speaker. So I like to thank you very much, Ms. Dolores Huerta. It's been a pleasure. If we can all give her a virtual or a actual applause. Thank you so much. It was a true pleasure to have you here, distinguished guest. Thank you so much. And it was really appreciated. So Ms. Huerta, thank you so much. And
I would like to end with a chat.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if people can unmute themselves. So, but I'm going to ask you all a question, and I know you know the answer, okay? So there's 2 questions I want to ask you. One of them is, who's got the power? I want you to say, we've got the power. Then we'll say, what kind of power? I want you to say people power. All right. And then we can end with a hand clap, organized hand clap. So let's go. Who's got the power?
We got the power.
What kind of power?
People power.
So are we going to use our people power out there to change our communities? What do we say? And get everybody involved in civic action? What do we say? ¿Se puede o no se puede?
Sí se puede.
Yes, sí se puede.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. So thank you very much for having me. I really love sharing this conversation with you. Thank you.
Thank
so
you. Thank you so much, Ms. Huerta.
Thank you so much.
And-
An honor.
You're welcome.
And,
Thank
and as always, I'm going to take just 2 more minutes left of your time. If we could just review real quick. Let me just present my screen. Can everyone see it?
And you can learn more about our foundation at doloreshuerta.org. Okay.
Yes, I do have that for everyone. As always, if you want to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, we have our link tree. My colleague Stephanie will be putting that in the chat. Finally, coming up, we are going to go dark next week on March 15th. So remember, we're going dark on the following March 22nd. And don't worry, I'll be sending everybody a reminder. Please make sure to mark your calendars. That's the final Policy Leadership Academy meeting. We're going to be doing a survey. You're going to get a little gift. And so make sure that you mark your calendars for March 22nd. But again, I'll be sending you a reminder. And then finally, as I always like to say, you could be doing anything else on your Tuesday. You're here with us. Thank you so much. This is the final module for speakers. I think we ended it on a great note with Ms. Dolores Huerta. And again, so happy to have you. Si se puede. So thank you so much, everyone, and enjoy your Tuesday evening and the rest of your week. And happy International Women's Day.
Thank you.
Same to you and thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Good evening. Buenas noches.
Thank you.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Huerta.
Thank you, Mr. Dolores.
Thank you, Mr. Dolores.
You're welcome.
Monette. Hey, Ms. Monette.
Oh, I was just about to remove.
I just removed them.